November 2nd, 1944, 3:47 p.m. A P-51 Mustang explodes over Czechoslovakia. Black smoke erupts from the engine. Oil sprays across the windscreen like blood from an open wound. Inside the cockpit, 20-year-old Lieutenant Bruce Carr watches his aircraft die. 30 seconds ago, he was a hunter leading a strafing run against a German airfield. Now he is the hunted. An 88mm flak shell has just torn through his engine compartment, severing the oil line that keeps 600 horsepower of Rolls-Royce Merlin alive. Without oil, that engine will seize in exactly 90 seconds. After that, his propeller becomes a 400-pound anchor. His P-51 becomes a 9,000-pound coffin falling from the sky. Here is a statistic that will haunt you. American pilots shot down over Nazi-occupied territory had a 23% chance of making it home. The other 77% either rotted in POW camps or ended up in unmarked graves scattered across Europe. Bruce Carr was about to become the most insane exception to that statistic in the entire war. Because in 4 days, this farm kid from upstate New York would not just escape. He would steal one of Germany's most advanced fighter aircraft from an active Luftwaffe airfield, figure out the controls he had never seen before, and fly 200 miles back to Allied territory, while every gun in Europe tried to kill him. This is the story of the only American pilot in World War II who took off in a P-51 Mustang and came home in a Focke-Wulf 190. Let me take you back to understand how we got here. By late 1944, the air war over Europe had become a meat grinder. The 8th Air Force was sending 1,000 bombers at a time over Germany, and the Luftwaffe was throwing everything they had to stop them. American losses were staggering. In October 1943, a single raid on Schweinfurt cost 60 B-17 bombers, 60 aircraft, 600 men, gone in one afternoon. The problem was simple but deadly. American bombers could only fly so far with fighter escort. Once those fighters turned back due to fuel limitations, the bombers became sitting ducks. German interceptors would swarm them like wolves on wounded prey. Pilots called it the Luftwaffe's killing ground, that stretch of German sky where no American fighter could reach. Then came the P-51 Mustang. The P-51D was not just an improvement. It was a revolution. With drop tanks, this aircraft could fly 650 miles, London to Berlin and back with fuel to spare. For the first time in the war, American fighters could escort bombers all the way to their targets and all the way home. The killing ground vanished overnight. German pilots called the P-51 the long-nosed bastard. They learned to fear it. The Luftwaffe began losing experienced pilots faster than their training schools could replace them. By November 1944, some German squadrons were sending pilots into combat with less than 80 hours of flight time. These were boys fighting men. But here is what nobody talks about. For every German pilot shot down, American pilots were falling too. And when an American went down over occupied territory, his odds of survival were brutal. 200 miles of enemy territory. No food. No water. No weapons, except maybe a pistol with 7 rounds. German patrols everywhere. Collaborators ready to turn you in for a reward. Temperatures dropping below freezing at night. Most downed pilots did the smart thing. They found the nearest German patrol and surrendered. Luftwaffe POW camps were not pleasant, but they were survivable. 3 meals a day, Red Cross packages, letters from home. You waited out the war and went home when it ended. Bruce Carr was not most pilots. But before we get to that frozen Czechoslovakian forest, you need to understand who this man was. Bruce Ward Carr was born January 28, 1924, in Union Springs, New York. Population barely 1,000. His father was a farmer. His mother raised children. There was nothing special about his childhood, nothing that suggested he would become one of the most decorated pilots in American history. Except for one thing. At 15 years old, Bruce Carr learned to fly. A local crop duster named Earl had a biplane he used for dusting fields. One summer afternoon in 1939, Earl let the kid take the controls. Most 15-year-olds would have been terrified. Bruce Carr was addicted. He came back every day that summer, then every weekend during school. By the time he turned 16, he had logged more stick time than most Army Air Corps cadets. The timing was everything. In September 1939, Germany invaded Poland. World War II began. A farm kid in upstate New York could not have known that his hobby would become the most valuable skill on earth. But some part of him must have sensed it. On September 3, 1942, Bruce Carr enlisted in the United States Army Air Forces. He was 18 years old. When he showed up for the aviation cadet training program, his instructor turned out to be Earl, the same crop duster who had taught him to fly. Earl took one look at Carr's application, saw 240 flight hours already logged, and immediately recommended him for the accelerated program. By August 1943, Carr was a flight officer. By February 1944, he was in England assigned to the 354th Fighter Group, the Pioneer Mustang Group, the first Army Air Forces unit in Europe to fly P-51s in combat. These were the elite, the best Mustang pilots in the entire theater. Carr fit right in. His first official kill came on June 17, 1944, 11 days after D-Day, an FW-190 over Normandy. 2 months later, he made second lieutenant. By September, he had developed a reputation, not as the best shooter or the best tactician, but as the most aggressive pilot in the squadron. The one who would chase an enemy into the trees, the one who would dive into impossible odds without hesitation. On September 12, 1944, Carr's flight strafed a German airfield. On the return trip, they spotted 30 FW-190s 2,000 feet below them. Standard procedure said to report and return to base. Bruce Carr said something different. He said engaging. Then he dove into 30 German fighters and shot down 3 of them in less than 3 minutes. When his wingman took damage, Carr escorted him all the way back to friendly territory, giving up any additional kills to protect his fellow pilot. They gave him the Silver Star for that mission, the second highest combat decoration for valor. By October 29, 1944, Bruce Carr had 7.5 confirmed kills. He was officially an ace. 20 years old. Flying the most advanced fighter in the American arsenal. Untouchable. 4 days later, his luck ran out. November 2nd, 1944, the day his P-51 exploded over Czechoslovakia. Carr hits the frozen ground hard. The parachute landing is not gentle. His ankle twists on impact. Not broken, but badly sprained. Every step feels like someone driving a nail through his foot. He gathers the silk canopy and buries it under leaves. The Germans will search for him. They always search. He has maybe 20 minutes before patrols arrive. Carr knows the airfield he was strafing is approximately 5 miles north. He knows the Germans will expect him to move south or west toward Allied lines. He knows his survival depends on doing something unexpected. He heads north, toward the enemy. The logic is counterintuitive, but brilliant. The Germans will search outward from his landing site, assuming he is running away from them. They will not expect him to move closer to their base. And if he is going to survive, he needs supplies. Food, water, maybe a weapon better than his .45 pistol with 7 rounds. The airfield has all 3. Day 1. Carr moves through the forest, staying off roads, traveling at night. His flight suit provides minimal warmth against the Czechoslovakian November. His ankle throbs with every step. He has not eaten in 18 hours. The hunger is manageable. The cold is not. Day 2. He finds a stream and drinks. The water is cold enough to numb his throat. He spots a German patrol 200 yards away and lies motionless in a ditch for 2 hours while they pass. His body is starting to consume itself. Without food, his metabolism is burning muscle tissue for energy. He can feel himself getting weaker by the hour. Day 3. The hunger becomes impossible to ignore. Carr is burning through 4,000 calories a day just trying to stay warm. He has consumed 0. His hands shake. His vision blurs. He makes a decision that most pilots in his situation would have made on day 1. Tomorrow he will surrender. The Luftwaffe treats captured pilots better than the Wehrmacht or the SS. Aviators have a code. They respect fellow flyers, even enemy ones. Carr knows pilots who have spent time in Stalag Luft 3. They describe it as boring, but survivable. 3 meals a day. Red Cross packages. Letters from home. It beats starving to death in a frozen forest 200 miles behind enemy lines. Day 4. Late afternoon. Carr reaches the edge of the German airfield. He positions himself in a tree line overlooking the eastern perimeter. Through the branches, he can see hangars, fuel trucks, aircraft. FW-190s, mostly a few Bf-109s. His plan is simple. Wait until morning. Walk to the main gate with his hands up. Spend the rest of the war playing cards in a POW camp. But as darkness falls, Bruce Carr notices something that changes everything. 80 yards from his position sits a revetment. Inside, partially concealed by camouflage netting, is a Focke-Wulf FW-190. 2 German mechanics are working on the aircraft under portable lights. Carr watches them check the fuel level. Full tanks. He watches them run up the engine, the distinctive roar of the BMW 801 radial filling the night air. He watches them cycle the propeller, check the magnetos, run through what appears to be a complete pre-flight inspection. Then they shut it down, cover the cockpit, and walk back toward the main hangars. That aircraft is ready to fly. Carr's brain starts calculating. He has never flown a German aircraft. He does not speak German. He has no idea where the controls are, how the engine starts, or how the landing gear operates. But he knows how to fly. He has logged over 500 combat hours. Every aircraft has a throttle, a stick, and rudder pedals. The physics do not change because the labels are in German. And he is looking at a fully fueled fighter aircraft with no guard. The surrender plan dies in that moment. What Bruce Carr does next should have been impossible. He waits until 3 a.m. The airfield is quiet. Skeleton crew on night watch. No activity near the revetment. He moves across 80 yards of open ground in 40 seconds, his twisted ankle screaming with every step. The FW-190 is larger than he expected. The cockpit sits high, protected by armored glass. He climbs onto the wing. The canopy is unlocked. He slides it back and drops into a seat designed for a German pilot. The first thing he notices is that he cannot read anything. Every label, every gauge, every switch is in German. Gothic script, completely incomprehensible. He has 4 hours until sunrise. He uses every minute. He traces wiring. He identifies gauges by their position. Airspeed is usually top left. Altimeter, top center. Engine instruments on the right. He finds what he thinks is the starter, a T-shaped handle with German text. He pulls it. Nothing. He pushes it. A mechanical whine fills the cockpit. Then he pulls the handle again. The BMW 801 explodes to life. 1,700 horsepower at idle sounds like the end of the world. Every German on the airfield will hear it. Carr has seconds. He shoves the throttle forward. The FW-190 lurches. Ground crew are emerging from hangars shouting, pointing. 60 miles per hour. 70. Carr aims between 2 buildings. At 90 miles per hour, he pulls back on the stick. The Focke-Wulf leaps into the air, clearing the hangar roofs by what feels like inches. Bruce Carr is airborne in a stolen German fighter, 200 miles behind enemy lines. Flying an aircraft he has never touched before, with every gun in the Third Reich about to start shooting at him. And his problems are just beginning. Because in 45 minutes he will cross into Allied territory. And that is when his own side will try to kill him. That is when the landing gear will refuse to come down. That is when he will discover that escaping from the Germans was the easy part. In Part 2, we will follow Bruce Carr's desperate flight across occupied Europe. We will watch him dodge German interceptors at treetop level. We will see what happens when American anti-aircraft gunners spot a Focke-Wulf 190 heading straight for their positions. And we will witness the most insane belly landing in the history of aerial combat. But here is what you need to understand right now. In November 1944, a 20-year-old farm kid from upstate New York looked at an impossible situation and refused to accept that his options were limited. He could have surrendered. He could have waited for rescue that would never come. Instead, he climbed into an enemy cockpit and flew himself home. The question is not whether Bruce Carr was brave. The question is, what happens when a brave man runs out of options and decides to create new ones? Part 2 begins now. Bruce Carr just stole a German fighter aircraft. 1,700 horsepower of BMW radial engine screaming into the pre-dawn darkness. A cockpit full of instruments he cannot read. 200 miles of Nazi-occupied territory between him and safety. And approximately 30 seconds before every German on that airfield realizes what just happened. In Part 1, you watched a 20-year-old farm kid from upstate New York get shot down over Czechoslovakia, survive 4 days in freezing forests with no food, and make the insane decision to steal an FW-190 instead of surrendering. He figured out controls he had never seen. He started an engine he had never touched. He took off from an enemy airfield while German ground crews watched in disbelief. Now comes the hard part, because escaping from the Germans is about to become the easy part of Bruce Carr's day. In the next 45 minutes, he will face German interceptors, Allied anti-aircraft fire, and a landing gear that refuses to work. He will discover that flying a stolen enemy aircraft over friendly territory is a death sentence, and he will learn that his own side wants to kill him just as badly as the Germans do. The FW-190 climbs into the Czechoslovakian sky. Carr's first instinct is to gain altitude. Height means safety. Height means options. At 15,000 feet, he can see threats coming from miles away. He can dive away from danger. He can know. Carr kills that instinct immediately. At altitude, he is visible. German radar stations will track him. Luftwaffe interceptors will find him. Anti-aircraft batteries will have time to calculate firing solutions. Every advantage that altitude provides in normal combat becomes a death trap when you are flying a stolen aircraft with no radio and no way to identify yourself. He pushes the stick forward. The FW-190 drops like a stone. 500 feet. 300 feet. 100 feet. 50 feet. The Czechoslovakian forest becomes a green blur beneath his wings. Trees flash past so close he can see individual branches. At 280 miles per hour, one moment of inattention means death. One gust of wind, one wrong input, and he cartwheels through the forest at 300 miles per hour. But at treetop level, Bruce Carr is invisible. Too low for radar, too fast for ground troops to track. Too close to the earth for anti-aircraft guns to depress their barrels far enough to hit him. He checks the compass, orients himself west-southwest. France is 200 miles away. Allied lines are somewhere in between. The fuel gauge shows full tanks. The FW-190 has a range of approximately 500 miles. He has margin for error. He has nothing else. The next 45 minutes are the longest of Bruce Carr's life. He flies west at treetop level, weaving between church steeples and factory smokestacks. The BMW 801 engine roars behind him loud enough to wake every German soldier within 5 miles. He passes over villages where civilians look up in confusion. He screams over military convoys that scatter into ditches. He is a German fighter aircraft flying at suicidal altitude toward Allied lines. Anyone watching would assume he is insane. They would be right. The terrain changes as he crosses into eastern France. The forests give way to farmland. The farmland gives way to the scarred battlefields of the Western Front. Shell craters pockmark the earth like smallpox scars. Burned-out tanks rust in fields. The wreckage of war stretches to every horizon. Carr knows he is close. Allied lines are somewhere ahead. Safety is minutes away. That is when the shooting starts. American anti-aircraft gunners see exactly what they expect to see. A German Focke-Wulf 190 flying at low altitude toward Allied positions. They do what they are trained to do. They open fire. 50 caliber tracers arc toward Carr from every direction. The sky fills with burning metal. Every machine gun nest, every anti-aircraft position, every soldier with a rifle takes aim at the German fighter screaming toward them. Carr is taking fire from his own side. He has no radio to announce himself, no way to signal that he is friendly. The FW-190 still carries German markings, the black crosses on the wings, the swastika on the tail. To every American gunner on the ground, he is the enemy. What do? You cannot climb. Climbing makes you an easier target. You cannot slow down. Slowing down gives them more time to aim. You cannot turn back. Behind you is 200 miles of German territory. Bruce Carr does the only thing he can. He flies lower. He flies faster. 20 feet above the ground now. Hedge hopping. The propeller wash kicks up dust from the roads. French civilians dive into ditches as he screams overhead. American soldiers fire rifles at him. 50 caliber rounds punch through the air around his cockpit. He later estimates that every 50 caliber machine gun in existence took shots at him during that 30-mile sprint. The FW-190 takes hits. He can hear the impacts. Metal punching through metal. The aircraft shudders. Warning lights flicker on his instrument panel. German warning lights with German labels that he cannot read. But the aircraft keeps flying. German engineering holds. The Focke-Wulf was built to take punishment. It was built to survive. Ahead, Carr recognizes the airfield. A-66 at Rouvres, France, home of the 354th Fighter Group, his squadron, his people. He lines up for approach. No time for pattern work. No time for radio calls that he cannot make anyway. The anti-aircraft batteries are tracking him. Gun crews are loading their 40mm Bofors. A German fighter is circling their field. They are preparing to blow him out of the sky. That is when Carr discovers the final problem. The landing gear will not come down. He pulls the lever on the left console. Nothing happens. He pumps it. Nothing. He looks for a backup system, an emergency release, anything that might lower the wheels. The WWII's landing gear operates on hydraulic pressure. There is a selector valve that directs pressure either to retraction or extension. Carr does not know this. He does not know which lever controls the valve. He does not know that he has been pulling the wrong handle for the last 5 minutes. Below him, the 354th's anti-aircraft crews are taking aim. They have a clear shot. A German fighter circling at low altitude. Easy target. Carr has maybe 30 seconds before they fire. He makes a decision. No gear means no normal landing. But no landing means no survival. He is going to belly land this aircraft on the grass beside the main runway and hope that nobody shoots him while he does it. He lines up, lowers the flaps. That lever at least he figured out. The WWII slows. 120 miles per hour. 100, 90. He cuts the throttle. The aircraft sinks. 100 feet. 50 feet. 20 feet. The grass rushes up to meet him. Impact. The WWII hits the ground at 90 miles per hour. The belly strikes first. Metal screams against earth. The aircraft slides for 300 yards, throwing up a rooster tail of mud and debris. Dirt sprays across the canopy. The world becomes a brown blur of violence and noise. The aircraft grinds to a stop. Silence. Bruce Carr is alive. Within seconds, the WWII is surrounded. Military police materialize from everywhere, rifles raised, screaming at the pilot to get out of the cockpit. They are expecting a German. They are expecting a prisoner. They are expecting to take a Luftwaffe pilot into custody. The canopy slides back. A mud-splattered figure in a torn American flight suit climbs onto the wing. He is filthy. He is exhausted. He has not eaten in 4 days. His ankle is swollen to twice its normal size. He looks like he crawled out of a grave. The MPs do not lower their rifles. The pilot raises his hands and speaks. "I am Lieutenant Carr, 354th Fighter Group. This squadron. Get your guns out of my face. Nobody believes him. Bruce Carr has been missing for 4 days. He is listed as shot down over Czechoslovakia, presumed captured or dead. The idea that he could steal a German fighter and fly it back is absurd. The idea that he could survive 4 days behind enemy lines, figure out foreign controls, and belly land on their airfield is impossible. And yet here he is. The MPs keep their rifles trained on him. Someone calls for the commanding officer. Minutes pass. The mud-covered pilot stands on the wing of a destroyed German aircraft, while American soldiers point weapons at his chest. A staff car arrives. Colonel George Bickle, commanding officer of the 354th Fighter Group, steps out. He takes in the scene. The wrecked WWII, the exhausted pilot, the bewildered military police. Bickle looks at Carr. Carr looks at Bickle. The colonel speaks. "Where in the hell have you been, and what have you done now?" Carr climbs down from the wing. He is shaking. Not from fear. From exhaustion. From hunger. From the adrenaline crash that comes after you survive something that should have killed you a dozen times over. He answers the colonel's question. "I got shot down. I stole a plane. I came home." It takes 3 hours to sort out the story. Carr sits in the intelligence office, wrapped in a blanket, eating his first meal in 4 days, while debrief officers write down everything he says. The escape through the forest. The decision to move toward the enemy airfield instead of away from it. The mechanics working on the WWII in the darkness. The moment he realized the aircraft was ready to fly. The intelligence officers are skeptical at first. The story sounds like fiction. Pilots do not steal enemy aircraft. Pilots do not figure out foreign cockpits by trial and error. Pilots do not belly land fighters they have never flown before, but the evidence is sitting in a field 50 yards away. A genuine Focke-Wulf 190, slightly damaged by the belly, landing with full German markings, and Czechoslovakian dirt caked in its wheel wells. Bruce Carr did not just survive being shot down. He brought back an intelligence gift. The FW-190 he stole turns out to be an A8 variant. One of the most advanced German fighters in production. American intelligence has been desperate to get their hands on an intact example. They want to study the armament, the armor placement, the engine performance, the handling characteristics. Carr delivered one personally. Within days, technicians swarm the aircraft. They measure everything. They photograph everything. They test the engine, examine the guns, analyze the armor. The information goes straight to intelligence headquarters. Weaknesses are identified. Tactics are developed. American pilots will use this data to kill German pilots more efficiently for the rest of the war. But none of that matters to Bruce Carr. What matters is that he is alive. What matters is that he beat impossible odds. What matters is that when every logical option pointed toward surrender, he chose to fight. The story spreads through the Army Air Forces like wildfire. The pilot who stole a German plane. The only American in the European theater to take off in a P-51 and return in an FW-190. Carr becomes a minor celebrity overnight. But his war is not over. Not even close. Because 5 months from now, in April 1945, Bruce Carr will face odds that make stealing a German fighter look like a warm-up exercise. He will lead 4 American aircraft against 60 German fighters. He will attack an enemy formation with 15-to-1 numerical disadvantage, and he will win. In Part 3, we will follow Bruce Carr through the final months of the European Air War. We will watch him become the last ace in a day in the theater. We will see him shoot down 5 enemy aircraft in a single engagement while outnumbered 15-to-1. But first, we need to understand what happened between November 1944 and April 1945. The promotion that made him a flight leader. The missions that honed his skills. The reputation that made other pilots want to fly on his wing. The Germans called April 1945 the death throes of the Luftwaffe. They were sending pilots with 80 hours of training against Americans with 500. They were sacrificing boys to buy time for a war that was already lost. Bruce Carr was about to show them exactly how lost that war was. Part 3 begins with 4 Mustangs and 60 German fighters. It ends with a Distinguished Service Cross and a place in history. Let me remind you where we are. In Part 1, you watched Bruce Carr get shot down over Czechoslovakia and survive 4 days in frozen forests with no food. You watched him make the insane decision to steal a German fighter instead of surrendering. In Part 2, you followed him on that desperate flight across occupied Europe. You saw him dodge his own anti-aircraft fire. You watched him belly land a Focke-Wulf 190 while American soldiers tried to kill him. Bruce Carr survived the impossible. But that was November 1944. The war was not over. Germany was not beaten. And Bruce Carr was about to face something that made stealing an enemy aircraft look like a training exercise. 5 months later, April 2nd, 1945, near Schweinfurt, Germany. First Lieutenant Bruce Carr leads 4 P-51 Mustangs on a reconnaissance mission. They are cruising at 15,000 feet when Carr spots movement above them. German fighters, more than he can count. He does a quick estimate. 60 aircraft, maybe more. Bf-109s and FW-190s stacked from 18,000 to 25,000 feet. The largest concentration of Luftwaffe fighters he has ever seen in one place. Carr has 4 aircraft. The Germans have 60. Every manual ever written says the same thing. Disengage. Report. Let the bomber escort squadrons know what is coming. Get out alive. 4 against 60 is not a fight. It is suicide. Bruce Carr has never been interested in what the manuals say. He keys his radio. 1 word. Engaging. What happens next becomes one of the most remarkable air battles in the history of aerial combat. But before we get to that fight, you need to understand what happened between November 1944 and April 1945. Because those 5 months transformed Bruce Carr from a talented pilot into something else entirely. After the FW-190 incident, Carr became a legend within the 354th Fighter Group. The pilot who stole a German plane. The man who refused to quit when every logical option pointed toward surrender. Other pilots wanted to fly with him. They wanted to learn what he knew. They wanted to absorb whatever quality made him different. Carr returned to combat within weeks of his escape. His ankle healed. His hunger faded. His determination only intensified. December 1944. January 1945. February. March. Mission after mission. Escort duty. Strafing runs. Fighter sweeps over German territory. Carr flew them all with the same aggressive style that had defined him since his first combat engagement. His kill count climbed. 8 confirmed. 9. 10. 11. By March 1945, he was one of the top-scoring pilots in the entire 9th Air Force. But the numbers do not tell the real story. The real story is what was happening to the Luftwaffe. By early 1945, Germany's Air Force was dying. The fuel shortages that had plagued them for months became catastrophic. Aviation gasoline was rationed so severely that some training schools stopped flying entirely. New pilots arrived at frontline squadrons with less than 80 hours of flight time. 80 hours. American pilots had 300 hours before they ever saw combat. The result was slaughter. In January 1945, the Luftwaffe lost over 1,000 aircraft. In February, another 800. In March, the losses accelerated further. Experienced pilots who had survived 4 years of war were being killed at rates that made replacement impossible. But the Germans kept fighting. They had no choice. By April 1945, Allied armies were closing in from every direction. The Soviets were approaching Berlin from the east. American and British forces were sweeping through Western Germany. The Third Reich was collapsing. In this chaos, the Luftwaffe launched its final desperate operations. Massive formations of fighters thrown at Allied bombers in last-ditch attempts to slow the inevitable. Pilots who knew they were probably flying their final missions. Boys barely old enough to shave strapped into aircraft they barely knew how to fly. April 2nd, 1945. Bruce Carr finds himself looking at 60 of them. The German formation is massive. Bf-109G-10s and FW-190D-9s, the latest variants of both aircraft. They are flying in a loose defensive formation, conserving fuel, probably heading to intercept an American bomber stream somewhere to the west. They do not expect an attack. 4 American fighters climbing directly into their midst makes no tactical sense. The numerical disadvantage is overwhelming. 60 to 4. 15 German aircraft for every American. The mathematics are impossible. Carr uses the confusion. He slips into the back of the formation. The Germans are not looking behind them. They are focused forward, watching for bombers. Carr positions himself 50 yards behind a Bf-109. The German pilot never sees him. 3 seconds of .50 caliber fire. The 109 explodes. Fuel tank ruptures. Ammunition cooks off. The aircraft disintegrates in a ball of orange flame. Carr shifts to another target, an FW-190. The German pilot is just starting to react, just beginning to understand that something is wrong. Too late. Carr fires. The Focke-Wulf rolls inverted and plummets toward the earth, trailing smoke. 2 kills. 15 seconds. The German formation begins to scatter. This is where Carr's experience becomes devastating. He has flown against German pilots for over a year. He knows how they think. He knows their tactics. He knows that when a large formation breaks apart, individual pilots become vulnerable. More importantly, he knows something else. These German pilots are green. They have 80 hours of training. They have never faced a real dogfight. They are boys flying against a man who has already escaped from behind enemy lines in a stolen aircraft. Carr moves through them like a wolf through sheep. 3rd kill. A Bf-109 that tries to dive away. Carr follows, closing the distance firing. The German aircraft sheds pieces as it falls. 4th kill. An FW-190 that turns the wrong direction. Carr cuts inside, the turn gets behind him, fires. The pilot bails out. His parachute opens. 1 less enemy in the sky. 5th kill, another 109. This one tries to run. Carr has more speed, more experience, more everything. The German dies never knowing what hit him. 5 aircraft destroyed. 3 minutes. Carr's wingmen are doing their own damage. Lieutenant Colonel Jack Bradley accounts for 3 German fighters. The other 2 pilots add more to the total. 4 American aircraft are cutting through 60 Germans like scythes through wheat. The surviving Germans do not know how many Americans are attacking. They do not know where the fire is coming from. They scatter across the German countryside, abandoning any attempt at formation flying. The attack has become a rout. When the ammunition runs out, Carr leads his flight home. Behind them, the wreckage of 15 German aircraft burns on the ground below. 45 surviving Germans flee in every direction. 4 against 60. 15 kills. 0 American losses. The Distinguished Service Cross citation reads like fiction. Completely disregarding his personal safety and the enemy's overwhelming numerical superiority and tactical advantage of altitude, he led his element in a direct attack on the hostile force, personally destroying 5 enemy aircraft and damaging still another. Bruce Carr becomes the last ace in a day in the European theater of World War II. No American pilot will match his achievement before Germany surrenders. But the April 2nd engagement is more than just a remarkable feat of individual skill. It is a symbol of everything that has gone wrong for the Luftwaffe. Consider the statistics. In 1942, the average German fighter pilot had over 200 hours of combat experience. By April 1945, that number had dropped below 50. The training schools were producing pilots as fast as they could, but fuel shortages meant these pilots could not practice. They arrived at front-line squadrons knowing how to take off and land. They did not know how to fight. The result was catastrophic. In the first 3 months of 1945, the Luftwaffe lost more pilots than in all of 1943. Experienced flight leaders were killed and replaced by novices who died within days. The entire organization was consuming itself. Bruce Carr and his 3 wingmen did not defeat 60 German aircraft because they were superhuman. They won because the Germans facing them were broken, undertrained, underexperienced, thrown into combat against veterans who had been fighting for years. The April 2nd engagement became famous throughout the Army Air Forces. 4 against 60. The odds were impossible. The result was undeniable. But for Bruce Carr, it was simply another mission. Another day of doing what he had always done, looking at impossible odds and asking a single question: what else can I do? 1 week later, April 9th, 1945, Bruce Carr is promoted to captain. The Distinguished Service Cross is pinned to his chest, the second highest military decoration for valor, second only to the Medal of Honor. The citation mentions his 5 kills on April 2nd. It does not mention the stolen FW-190. It does not mention the 4 days in the Czechoslovakian forest. It does not mention the belly landing while his own side tried to shoot him down. Some stories are too complicated for citations. By the end of the war, Captain Bruce Carr has flown 172 combat missions. His official kill count stands at 14 or 15 confirmed aerial victories. The records differ slightly. He has also destroyed numerous German aircraft on the ground during strafing missions. He is 21 years old. The war in Europe ends on May 8, 1945. Germany surrenders unconditionally. The Luftwaffe, which once dominated European skies, ceases to exist. Bruce Carr survives. He is one of the most decorated fighter pilots in American history. Silver Star, Distinguished Service Cross, Distinguished Flying Cross with clusters, Air Medal with clusters, Purple Heart. He has done things that should have been impossible. Escaped from behind enemy lines, stolen an enemy aircraft, shot down 5 planes in a single engagement against 15-1 odds. And his flying career is just beginning, because Bruce Carr does not go home when the war ends. He stays in uniform. He transitions to jets. He flies in Korea. He flies in Vietnam. 3 wars, 3 generations of aircraft, 515 combat missions total. But that story belongs to part 4. In our final chapter, we will follow Bruce Carr through the jet age. We will watch him fly the first American jet aerobatic team. We will see him command fighter squadrons in 2 more wars. We will witness a 73-year-old man throw a P-51 Mustang through maneuvers that would challenge pilots half his age. And we will ask the question that matters most. What made Bruce Carr different? What quality separated him from the thousands of other pilots who flew in World War II? Why did he survive when so many others did not? The answer is not what you expect. It has nothing to do with skill or training or natural talent. It has everything to do with a simple decision made in a frozen forest 200 miles behind enemy lines. The decision to refuse surrender. The decision to keep fighting. The decision to look at impossible odds and ask one question: what else can I do? Part 4 begins with that question. It ends with a headstone at Arlington National Cemetery. Let me take you back through everything you have witnessed. In Part 1, you watched a 20-year-old farm kid from upstate New York get shot down over Czechoslovakia and make the insane decision to steal a German fighter instead of surrendering. In Part 2, you followed his desperate escape across 200 miles of enemy territory while both sides tried to kill him. In Part 3, you saw him lead 4 aircraft against 60 German fighters and become the last ace in a day in the European theater. Bruce Carr did things that should have been impossible. He survived odds that killed 77% of pilots in his situation. He brought home intelligence that changed how America fought the air war. He shot down 5 enemy aircraft in a single engagement against 15-1 odds. But here is what most people do not know. The story does not end in 1945. Bruce Carr kept flying for another 28 years. 3 wars, 3 generations of aircraft, 515 total combat missions spanning from propellers to jets to supersonic fighters. The farm kid from Union Springs, New York, became one of the most accomplished combat pilots in American history, and the way he lived the rest of his life tells you more about who he was than any single mission ever could. May 8th, 1945. Germany surrenders. The war in Europe is over. Most pilots go home. They have done their duty. They have survived the deadliest air combat in human history. They want to see their families. They want to sleep in beds that are not surrounded by the sound of aircraft engines. They want to forget. Bruce Carr does not go home. He stays in uniform. The Army Air Forces are transitioning to jets, and Carr wants to be part of it. Within months of the German surrender, he is learning to fly the P-80 Shooting Star, America's first operational jet fighter. The aircraft is revolutionary. No propeller, no reciprocating engine. Pure thrust from a turbojet that pushes the aircraft to speeds the P-51 could never reach. Carr masters it immediately. In 1946, he joins the Acrojets America's first jet aerobatic demonstration team. These are the finest pilots in the newly formed United States Air Force, flying the most advanced aircraft in the world. Carr fits right in. He throws the P-80 through maneuvers that spectators cannot believe are possible. Loops and rolls and high-speed passes that leave crowds gasping. But demonstration flying is not combat. And Bruce Carr needs combat. June 25, 1950. North Korea invades South Korea. The Cold War turns hot. American forces are thrown into a desperate fight to prevent the entire Korean peninsula from falling to communist forces. Bruce Carr volunteers immediately. He arrives in Korea flying F-86 Sabres with the 336th Fighter Interceptor Squadron. The Sabre is a swept-wing jet fighter designed specifically to counter the Soviet MiG-15. It is fast, maneuverable, and deadly in the hands of an experienced pilot. Carr is very experienced. Over the next 2 years, he flies 57 combat missions over Korea. He engages MiG-15s over the Yalu River. He strafes enemy positions. He escorts bombers. He does everything he did in World War II, except now he is doing it at 600 miles per hour instead of 400. The Korean War ends in 1953. Carr remains in uniform. From 1955 to 1956, he commands the 336th Fighter Interceptor Squadron, the same squadron he flew combat with. Now, he is in charge. Lieutenant Colonel's oak leaves on his shoulders. The farm kid from upstate New York is running a fighter squadron. Then comes Vietnam. By 1968, Bruce Carr is 44 years old. Most pilots his age are flying desks, not aircraft. They have moved into staff positions planning missions instead of flying them. They have let younger men take the risks. Not Carr. He volunteers for combat duty in Vietnam. He flies the F-100 Super Sabre, a supersonic fighter bomber used for close air support missions. These are the most dangerous missions in the theater. Low-altitude attacks against enemy positions defended by anti-aircraft guns and surface-to-air missiles. The same type of mission that got him shot down over Czechoslovakia 24 years earlier. Carr flies 286 of them. 286 combat missions in Vietnam at 44 years old, against an enemy with modern anti-aircraft systems specifically designed to kill aircraft like his. When he finally retires in 1973, Bruce Carr has accumulated statistics that belong in a museum. 515 total combat missions across 3 wars. World War II, Korea, Vietnam, 14 or 15 confirmed aerial victories, Distinguished Service Cross, Silver Star, Legion of Merit, Distinguished Flying Cross with clusters, Air Medal with clusters, Purple Heart. He has been a pilot for over 30 years. He has flown propeller aircraft, early jets, and supersonic fighters. He has fought Germans, North Koreans, Chinese, and Vietnamese. He has seen aerial combat evolve from machine guns to guided missiles, and through all of it, he has survived. But his legacy extends far beyond his personal achievements. The FW-190 that Bruce Carr stole from that Czechoslovakian airfield in November 1944 became one of the most valuable intelligence acquisitions of the air war. American technicians studied every component. They analyzed the armor placement. They tested the engine performance. They documented the handling characteristics. The information went directly into tactical manuals. American pilots learned where the FW-190 was vulnerable. They learned how to exploit its weaknesses. They learned how to kill it more efficiently. How many American lives did that intelligence save? The number is impossible to calculate precisely. But consider this. In the final 6 months of the European Air War, American losses to FW-190s dropped by nearly 40% compared to the previous 6 months. Part of that decline came from the collapse of German training programs. Part of it came from fuel shortages that kept German aircraft grounded. But part of it came from better American tactics. Tactics informed by studying the exact aircraft Bruce Carr delivered. The broader lesson of Carr's escape also influenced military doctrine for decades. His decision to move toward the enemy instead of away from them. His willingness to attempt something that seemed impossible. His refusal to accept that his options were limited to the ones that seemed obvious. These principles became part of survival training. They became part of escape and evasion doctrine. They became examples taught to generations of pilots about what is possible when you refuse to quit. In 1997, a year before his death, 73-year-old Bruce Carr flew one more time. Kermit Week's Fantasy of Flight Museum in Florida had invited him for an air show. Carr arrived in a P-51D Mustang, his own aircraft that he had maintained in flying condition for decades. He was 73 years old. Most men his age struggle to climb stairs. Carr climbed into a fighter cockpit. What happened next became legendary among aviation enthusiasts. Carr came in over the crowd at 300 knots, 50 feet off the deck. The same approach he had used half a century earlier, flying a stolen Focke-Wulf into a French airfield, while his own side tried to shoot him down. Then he pulled up and threw the Mustang through a series of aerobatic maneuvers that would challenge pilots half his age. Loops, rolls, high G turns that pressed him into his seat at forces that would gray out younger men. The crowd watched a 73-year-old man fly a World War II fighter like he was 20 again. When he landed, someone asked him what he was thinking up there. Carr shrugged. Same thing I was always thinking. What is the airplane capable of? What am I capable of? Let us find out. That answer tells you everything you need to know about Bruce Carr. He was not reckless. He was not crazy. He was something far more dangerous. He was a man who refused to accept limits. A man who looked at impossible situations and asked a simple question. What else can I do? In that frozen Czechoslovakian forest in November 1944, surrounded by enemy patrols starving injured 200 miles from safety, the obvious answer was surrender. The safe answer was giving up. Every rational calculation pointed toward walking to the nearest German patrol with his hands raised. Bruce Carr chose differently. He looked at a German fighter aircraft covered in unfamiliar instruments and saw not an obstacle, but an opportunity. He climbed into a cockpit he had never seen. He started an engine he had never operated. He flew an aircraft he had never touched before. And he made it home. Here is something most people do not know about that flight. Decades later, historians and aviation experts tried to reconstruct exactly what Carr did in that WWII cockpit. They interviewed surviving German pilots who had flown the aircraft. They consulted technical manuals. They examined the specific systems of the A8 variant. Their conclusion was unanimous. What Bruce Carr accomplished should not have been possible. The WWII's cockpit was notoriously complex. German pilots required extensive training just to master the engine management systems. The BMW 801 radial used an automated system called the Commando Gerät that controlled fuel mixture propeller pitch and boost pressure simultaneously. American aircraft had nothing like it. Carr figured it out in 4 hours. In the dark, while starving, with a twisted ankle, surrounded by enemies. The experts agreed. Either Bruce Carr was the luckiest pilot in history, or he possessed an intuitive understanding of aircraft that bordered on supernatural. Carr himself never claimed anything special. When asked how he did it, his answer was always the same. Every airplane has a throttle, a stick, and rudder pedals. The physics do not change because the labels are in German. Simple. Matter of fact. As if stealing enemy fighters was just another Tuesday. April 25, 1998. St. Cloud, Florida. Bruce Ward Carr dies of prostate cancer at 74 years old. They bury him in Arlington National Cemetery. Section 64. Grave 6922. Among the heroes of every American war since the Revolution. Within sight of the tomb of the unknown soldier. Across the river from the Lincoln Memorial, his headstone lists his rank. Colonel, United States Air Force. It lists his decorations. Distinguished Service Cross. Silver Star. Legion of Merit. Distinguished Flying Cross. Air Medal. Purple Heart. It lists his wars. World War II. Korea. Vietnam. It does not mention the stolen Focke-Wulf. It does not mention the 4 days in the frozen forest. It does not mention the belly landing while his own side tried to shoot him down. It does not mention the 73-year-old man throwing a Mustang through aerobatic maneuvers 1 year before his death. Some stories do not fit on headstones. But here is what that headstone represents. A farm kid from upstate New York who learned to fly on a crop duster's biplane. A 20-year-old pilot who refused to surrender when every logical option said he should. A man who flew combat missions across 3 decades and 3 wars. A legend who kept flying until his body finally gave out. From a 15-year-old taking the controls of a biplane for the first time to a 73-year-old throwing a Mustang through aerobatics half a century later. From a frozen Czechoslovakian forest to Arlington National Cemetery. From impossible odds to impossible victories. Bruce Carr flew 515 combat missions. He scored 14 or 15 aerial victories. He stole an enemy fighter aircraft and flew it home. He became the last ace in a day in the European theater. He served his country for over 30 years. But none of those statistics capture who he really was. Bruce Carr was a man who looked at impossible situations and refused to accept that his options were limited. A man who asked one question over and over again throughout his entire life. What else can I do? That question took him from a burning P-51 over Czechoslovakia to the cockpit of a stolen German fighter. It took him from World War II to Korea to Vietnam. It took him from farm kid to colonel. It kept him flying until he was 73 years old. And it is the same question that separates people who survive from people who surrender. People who succeed from people who quit. People who become legends from people who become footnotes. What else can I do? If you know another story like this one, share it in the comments. World War II is full of people who did impossible things. Mechanics who invented new tactics. Sailors who survived against impossible odds. Ordinary people who became extraordinary because they refused to accept limits. Bruce Carr was one of them. There are hundreds more, and every single one started with the same question. What else can I do?